Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the seminar, the webinar today. I'm Rob Walker. I'm the CEO of BIE. Alongside me, chairing today's discussion is Eoin Canty, who is a director here at BIE, and he is our diversity and inclusion lead. For those of you that don't know BIE, we're an executive recruitment company. We have been building leadership and enabling change for over 20 years now. And we do that through a combination of interim management, permanent resourcing, and transformation expertise. We do that really to sort of work with our clients to enable them to adapt and plan and deliver that change. D&I is a huge part of what we do. It helps us, we feel, to know our clients better, to perform better, and to support businesses in general. We recognise that there's much more that we can do, but this is the fourth in a series of webinars that we've held. And we are committed to questioning, to listening, and facilitating discussions through our networks to support our candidates and our clients. Eoin, over to you.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Rob. I'm delighted to be hosting today's discussion. As Rob mentioned, this is actually the fourth in our series of D&I webinars, which we're holding probably about 3 a year. So building on the recent ones of around the topics of LGBTQ, allyship, and our most recent one on creating a trans-inclusive workplace from last autumn, which was very well received by many of you who are hopefully here again today. Social mobility, although not one of the protected characteristics within D&I, it touches on many of them, and often actually more than one at a time. As Rob mentioned, D&I is a real focus for us here at BIE, so we're really delighted to be able to host today's discussion. We see D&I as a fundamental pillar of fairness within our business, but also this reflects on the businesses that we work with and vice versa. Particularly, social mobility has a resonance when we think of some of the charities that we support at BIE, one of which is the Drive Forward Foundation, which works to support young care leavers, and also the 10,000 Black Interns program, which we're a part of. And although the 10,000 Black Interns program isn't specifically focused on social mobility, it touches on it for some of the people involved. Today's panel discussion is going to help us better understand social mobility, what it means, how it can be measured, and also what we can do to improve it in our businesses. Our 5 panelists come from a range of different backgrounds and experiences, and we'll be sharing some fascinating and informative stories from their own personal lives, but also from the perspectives of the corporates and charities they work for. The introduction and discussion today will probably last around 45 minutes, after which there'll be ample time for you, our audience, to ask questions. And do please keep those coming through, even through the discussion. Just use the Q&A function, which you'll find on the screen today. We also have a little question we'd like to ask you, but we'll come to that a bit later. We'll be using the Slido function for that, or the Slido website, but it's just good to maybe get some of your perspective as to what you see around social mobility. Today's discussion is going to be recorded, and afterwards we'll share a write-up as well as that recording out with you if you'd like to sort of learn a bit more or sort of follow up on today's event. So without further ado, I'll pass over to our panelists to introduce themselves, and I really hope that you find today's discussion a very useful one. Sarah, if you could kick off with a little intro of yourself, please.
Thank you, Eoin, and thank you, everyone. It's great to join you today, and it's great to be having this conversation about social mobility, which is my organisation's and personal mission. So I'm Sarah. I'm the Chief Executive of the Social Mobility Foundation. We're a charity, and social mobility and opportunity is our purpose. And we deliver on that purpose in 3 ways. We do 3 strategic interventions. The first is a direct programme of support for young people from low-income families who have lots of talent and ambition, but don't have the knowledge and the networks to secure the opportunities that their talent deserves and their ambition wants. So we work with them to connect them with opportunities to get work experience, to get careers and skills support. They get a mentor, professional mentor, who volunteers to work with them and help them build their confidence. And they get practical help with applying to university, applying to internships and graduate schemes, and support with opportunities. And through that programme, their talent and their ambition is supported with the networks and the opportunities to enable them to achieve that talent and get into careers that would otherwise be closed to them. We also work directly with employers to inform, advise, and use all of our insight from our programme work to help employers to prioritise social mobility. And the biggest element of that is the Social Mobility Employers Index. Some of you may have heard of the index. Some of you may have previously entered the index. Some of you may be interested to know that this year's index opened for entries yesterday. So we'd love to hear from you if you are interested. The index is about enabling employers to understand and benchmark their social mobility work, to get feedback, advice on what to prioritise and what to do next, and to be part of a community of practice around employer-led social mobility. And then the third thing we do as a charity is we advocate and campaign for awareness and action on social mobility. We want everyone who can to understand social class disadvantage and to do their bit to help to tackle it. And as part of all of those three interventions, that's my job on the panel today, to share what we know, what we see from other partners and organisations, and to, I hope, help share some of that advice and some of that insight that we've gathered. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. Justin, if you'd like to maybe introduce yourself.
Thanks, Eoin. Yeah, Justin Ricks. I'm a partner at Grant Thornton. For those who haven't heard of us, we're a professional services firm, and I work in our business consulting team. Specifically, I head up what's called our people consulting business. Pretty much does what it says on the tin, is we help our clients on all aspects around their people agenda. But also, I'm part of our social mobility board within GT itself. And we are tasked with developing and executing our strategy around social mobility as part of our kind of broader D&I agenda. And just on that point, inclusion and diversity is a key strategic objective for us as a business. Our CEO, Dave Dunkley, has made a very personal commitment to that in terms of it's one of his key objectives in terms of us making our business everyday inclusive. I think in terms of social mobility, this was one of the areas that we first really proactively started to focus on. And I guess what we thought about when we did this back in 2017 was we really need to kind of think about the pool of talent that we're casting our net in terms of attracting people into not just Grant Thornton, but into our industry generally. And I think, you know, historically, like a lot of the other professional services firms, we drew mainly people from a relatively small number of universities, and academic qualifications was a very important part of assessing whether we thought someone would be right for a career at GT. So as I say, back in 2017, we kind of tore that up and said, you know, we got rid of minimum education qualifications and very much switched to testing for potential rather than academic achievement. So let's level the playing field in terms of where people start from. And also we made a very deliberate pledge to shift from what was historically kind of 90% graduates, 10% school leavers to 50-50. Because again, that very much broadened the talent pool to who we were talking to. Very challenging because, you know, historically you could go to, you know, a dozen universities and, you know, that was it, you were fine. We're going to hundreds of schools and colleges, but what that really did is really helped us think about how do we reach those people that never would have thought of a career in with us or in professional services generally. And also, I think what we decided to do was very much around that early career stage. We take 400-500 trainees every year, and kind of thinking about, kind of diversifying that pool the talent pool that we draw upon really helps us to build those long-term foundations going forward. So we've reached our 50-50 school leavers and grads, which is a fantastic result over a relatively short period of time. And I think in terms of, for us as a business, because we've started in 2017, we've really started to kind of build a good track record, both in terms of understanding how because it's not just about the diversity, it's also about the inclusion. So how do we make sure that when those people join our organization, that they can feel part and be inclusive and feel included within an organization so that they stay ultimately. From a personal perspective, why is this important to me? Well, from a kind of hard business perspective, it makes absolute sense. The greater diversity we have around thinking, experience, outlook, etc., all of that, the more diverse we have around those things, the much stronger our business is. But from a personal perspective, kind of reflecting on where I started, I had a very different background to most of the people I started my career with. I wasn't the best person at school. I didn't have a degree. I had to kind of stand on my own 2 feet pretty early. I left home before I finished school. And someone just basically took a chance on me. I think that will be kind of echoed with lots of other panelists here. And kind of rather unpromising, kind of prospect behind the bar of their local pub, and gave me a chance. And 30 years later, it's given me an absolutely fantastic career. So on an individual level, I really want to make sure that I do that. I give people that chance that I had. But I think also systemically, and this is kind of going back to what Sarah was saying, I'm really keen to avoid this just being luck, that a person can come across the right person who gives them that chance. We have to make this far more systemic, and make sure that people can see it as an opportunity, but also then get the opportunity for someone to give them the chance to have a fantastic career. So that's me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Justin. Dax, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. I'm Dax Grant. I am the Chief Executive of Global Transform, and that is a business that's focused on working with top boards in FTSE and Fortune firms, but also a lot of work in the venture space. So either advising or actually on the company boards itself. So really interesting environment, and again, a key one for diversity, inclusion, and making sure social mobility lands in all places across the globe. So I do feel a deep sense of commitment and duty to drive the social mobility cause. Some of the things I'm also involved in personally are, we have a family foundation, was called the Grant Family Foundation. And that again is focused on opportunities for young people from different backgrounds, and really recognising also that whatever your background, there's an opportunity to add value into the world. The ability to tap into each other's potential is an exponential piece that really leadership is only just about to touch into, and so really, really interesting from that sort of space. We've done quite a lot of work with local schools, so local state school. We've done some fundraising and also sponsored their sports campus. This again shows that you don't need to be from any particular background or space to make things happen. We raised several million across a science discovery centre and a FA regulated sports campus with an FA regulated pitch. This was all done with local people, and everybody pulled together to raise absolutely millions in that campaign to create opportunities and create those early stage opportunities. Really, really important to catch everybody at their earliest juncture in life and give that right and positive environment, which is what the foundation is all about. So that's a little bit about the foundation. We do other things as well. We've worked with Cambridge University to create awards and that currently has been focused in the biochemistry space, particularly reflecting on the effects of the pandemic on the population, and particularly again in that social mobility space, recognising where there is worldwide thought leadership. We've decided to recognise those folks again, irrespective of background, and really encouraging everybody to follow their true path in life. The other side of it as well, I'm a board member of Mission Beyond, and that's working with a fabulous lady, Harriet Green. We have a fantastic board group and supporting group, and we are focused on the 1 million job opportunities in the UK, and making sure that we create that digital platform that we connect young people from lots of different backgrounds with the right opportunities. And this is about nothing new. This is about setting the platform up and really leveraging the skills that we know all young people have. So it's about identifying those skills, providing mentoring and translation services, and really working across the industry. So some very exciting conversations ranging from Downing Street to major tech firms and other organisations. Again, really keen to hear from folks either as part of that in supporting that platform or in getting involved in that platform. So opportunities for practical steps today within that. And my final piece really is around my personal story. Again, underpins the reason why I do what I do. My background was certainly not privileged. I was the daughter of a coal miner, and my mum was a shepherdess. My background is Bosnian, actually, despite the British accent, and I couldn't speak any English at all when I joined an English school. So I was really starting with a disadvantage compared to anyone that would walk into a school normally. So it didn't put me off. There was a learning curve, don't get me wrong, it was steep. But from there, I did navigate the system, and I do navigate the system, and now I navigate the system for other people. So I was fortunate enough to end up at Cambridge University and work with some of the top business schools, work with Harvard, take on some of the major global jobs, most recently CIO of Global Operations for HSBC, but also other interesting roles within fintech. So from my personal story, I know what it's like when it's tough. I know what it's like when you succeed. I know what it's like to do that as a mother, and I know how to do that without lots and lots of nannies and other support. So there is a path through it. It's not always obvious. And so my personal mission is to create as many open opportunities for young people today. And that's why I'm here.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thanks, Dax. Stephen, over to you.
Thanks very much. My name is Steve Haines. I'm CFO of Joseph Homes Limited, an SME residential developer based in London. And like Dax and other people here today, mine is as much a lived experience as a professional one. I was in the care system from 5 to 14, left the care and went to the stewardship of my father in relative poverty. If we were lucky, we had 350p's, one we could put in the gas, one we could put in the electric, and one we could put in the telly. If there was only one, you had to choose whether you had light or you had heat, and that was life. And as a youngster, that's what you know. Because of that, I sort of flunked my school. I was doing really well in care, but sort of came out to the situation where I didn't perform as I should. And really, at the age of 15, 16, I decided that I really had to take the opportunities is to secure my own core needs. I was fortunate enough to gain a job with the local authority at 17 in accountancy. Not a career choice necessarily, but just a way of surviving and a way of developing. Work was really important to me. It gave me a sense of identity, it gave me a framework to work within, and it really gave me as an individual a way of progressing forward. And I was so fortunate to, one, be given the opportunity, but two, in my first 3 roles, I had some really significant managers who took the time to invest in me as an individual, to teach me what good looked like, to structure me through night school, to ensure that I took the opportunities that were available to me, but really to sort of shape the rest of my life. And I'm now fortunate enough to have had a career at board level since I was 30, so that's 27 years. I've achieved much more than I've ever dreamt was ever possible as a youngster. And I got involved in this through working with the Drive Forward Foundation, who support children and youngsters coming out of the care system. And some of their inspiring stories are incredible. Some of the drive, some of the passion, some of the desire to achieve is first class. And you know, as an organisation, I'll talk a bit about Joseph Haines in a second, but as an industry and as a society, we really do need to ensure that we open those doors as much as we can, and that we provide as much opportunity as we can for young people to reach their potential. And you know, I am aware of how important those first managers and mentors were to me, and giving a little bit of that back is probably the most rewarding thing I do at the current time. I work for Joseph Haines. We're an SME developer. We work under a Live Well manifesto, which is for making life better for all those we affect. That's our team, firstly, our customers, our neighbourhoods, and also the planet. So our goals are much wider than the pure economic goals of some organisations. It's difficult. We're an SME. We're in a highly challenging environment. But the values that we set are the values that we feel are inherent in terms of taking that wider viewpoint, taking that wider responsibility and developing our people. As I say, Drive Forward is very critical to me. And that's why I met Eoin, and yeah, the work I do there is utterly rewarding. So that's me.
Good. Well, thanks, Steve. And getting another sort of Drive Forward connection, that's where I also met Jasmine. So Jasmine, would you like to give a little intro of yourself?
Hello, everyone. So last but not least, I'm Jazz. Okay, am I off mute? Yeah.
No, you are. Yeah.
Okay. I'm Jazz, and I'm really excited to be at this event. To give a bit of an introduction to me, I'm the diversity and inclusion lead at Sky for the early careers department. So my role is managing the D&I strategy that we have across all of our early careers programs, including the graduate, apprenticeship, and internship programs. Outside of my day role, I'm very passionate about all things DEI, social mobility, and social change. So I do public speaking and activism, and it was actually at one of my speeches that I met Eoin, who invited me to this opportunity. I deliver keynote speeches on essentially the role that I believe businesses and corporates have to play in transforming society, specifically the outcomes of marginalized communities and young people. Many businesses view DEI as something to add on because it helps the business to function better. It might make the business more profitable, and that's one lens, but actually DEI is a chance to really transform the outcomes of so many people through employment. You know, a life of nothingness could be transformed into a life of productivity, purpose, and is a means to enable people to flourish into their higher self. So it's something that I'm really, really passionate about. So to give a bit of a backstory about me, my passion comes from my life, my lived experiences, the things that I've seen and witnessed. I've had a unique life, is one way to put it. I was born in China. I'm actually half Chinese, if you can tell. And as a young child, I was sent to London by myself. And when I arrived, it didn't end up going to plan. And I actually ended up getting taken into the care system. And it was an interesting experience. I was sent all around the city of London, lived in, 8 different placements in total, spent some time living with a massive Bengali family in the East End, went to live with a Nigerian family in Willesden Green, and eventually ended up in a children's home in which I was raised by Caribbean women, who taught me a lot of life lessons, but also I was exposed to a lot. And I say living in a children's home, you get exposed to the deepest and some of the most horrific issues facing disadvantaged young people in the UK. So that gave me my passion to want to make change, but I didn't know how to. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know that you could make change within the setting of corporate. So I bounced around a lot of different public sector roles in education, in the local authority, in higher education. And then eventually I found out about the industry of DEI and social mobility. And then I came into that. So yes, and now just passionately advocating and trying to make as much change as I can, because I think it's an industry that it's got a long way to go.
Thanks, Jazz. I mentioned that I'd be keen just to get a little bit of your thoughts as the audience as well as we go through today's discussion. And one of the things we'd just like to ask you a very quick question. And I think Sarah sort of laughed when I shared this question during our practice session, because it sounds quite, I don't know, formal or even legalistic or something. But it's really just, do you consider yourself to have come from maybe a lower socioeconomic or a less advantageous background? And if you'd like to take part, just go over to Slido and type in the code #BIE, and we'll share back those thoughts then afterwards. Sarah, I'd be really interested, and I'm sure many around attending today would be as well. Could you just give us a definition of what is social mobility and sort of how can it be measured?
Yeah, sure. And you've alluded to it already. The language around this can be really tricky sometimes. So social mobility in the kind of specific sense is about the chances of moving up or down economically in comparison to your parents' generation. So if social mobility is low, the chances of you achieving in a sort of career or financial sense anything different from your parents is low. And if social mobility is high, then things are going to change. There's a high chance of changing. Social mobility has become the term we use to describe awareness and action on socioeconomic disadvantage. And we use that term because socioeconomic disadvantage is a tongue twister and not the way people would often describe themselves. Social mobility, it's easier and kind of more positive to say. Can you measure it? Well, you can absolutely measure socioeconomic background. Everybody has a socioeconomic background, and you can define it and you can measure it. And there are three key questions when we're looking at socioeconomic background data that we recommend that organisations ask. One is about parental occupation. What did your parents do? One is about the type of school you went to. Did you go to a paying school? Did you go to a selective school? Did you go to a comprehensive state school? And the third is about free school meal eligibility. Doesn't matter whether or not you actually claimed them, because a lot of families don't claim them. Were you at any point in your education entitled to free school meals? And using that data, we can map people's socioeconomic background. And that data maps really clearly against opportunities that we know people will have in their education, their careers. So you know where someone is on that scale objectively, and you know that that means objectively there are chances that are or are not open to them. We also talk about social class and social class disadvantage. That's a subjective rather than an objective measure, much more emotive. It brings in things around identity, place, accent, culture. Really important if you're having a conversation about inclusive environments that you recognise socioeconomic background, those objective measures, and class identity, those subjective measures. And someone may feel working class and have a working class identity that doesn't necessarily map onto their socioeconomic background. Equally, someone may be really uncomfortable identifying as being from a working class background, especially if you've now become successful in your career, but their socioeconomic background may show that, like our panelists today, many of them have bucked that trend. So if you want to measure objective progress, socioeconomic background data is the measure. If you want to have an inclusive conversation, we talk about socioeconomic background and we talk about class identity, and you need to be open to the kind of ambiguity and identity bit of the conversation as well.
Brilliant, yeah, thank you. Dax, you mentioned as well about your involvement now in with Harriet Green's foundation. Could you maybe just tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, of course. We are called Mission Beyond, and we focus on the grand challenges in society. We are fully focused on social mobility. That is our cause, and shall remain our cause. We are, in essence, building a platform, a digital platform. So in the digital first society, it's really important that our young people are connected with opportunities. And so as part of that, we are working with a wide variety of organisations to secure the next stages of sponsorship and funds to complete the platform and the minimum viable proposition. We have been very fortunate. We've had a lot of fantastic conversations with Downing Street, and we are also working with some of the major global tech companies, and also companies in other sort of key sectors as well. So that's really in terms of the funds for the platform, and there's still opportunity to get involved. It's not about the size of contribution, but we do have a scalable proposition in terms of if someone invests in the Mission Beyond platform, to what they get back. The other side of it, putting the platform aside, is really building the ecosystem to enable connectivity of young people to some really exciting opportunities. And that, again, is another set of conversations that people practically on this call can get involved in. I'm very happy if anybody wants to approach me and the team, just drop me a note. But in essence, what that is about is identifying opportunities with different organisations and utilising the Mission Beyond platform as a positive conduit for those opportunities. So there are many organisations that we are engaging with, and we should build those partnerships into the platform. And it means that, you know, whatever route you come into, I'm a great believer that, you know, there are different ways of learning, whether that's apprenticeship, whether that's, you know, it may be an initial course, it may be something more than that, and it may be sort of, you know, fully paid jobs. There will be different opportunities within that. And there'll also be the opportunity then for connected services with that. So, you know, if a young person then approaches the platform, they are taken through a very smooth process that helps them identify some of the things that they maybe talk about day to day. So, you know, I led the basketball team, or I got a local paper round, or whatever it might be. Really turning that into some of the language that organisations recognise in terms of setting them up for success. And really accessing the skills that they've got. And the point of this is it's not necessarily about adding new skills all the time. There are elements to that, of course. We're all on a learning journey, but it's taking the experiences and the curricular, extracurricular and supercurricular activities that young people already do day to day, and really putting those in place in a way that they can describe when they're entering a workplace conversation. So equipping them with skills and the support around that. So it's very exciting. As I say, it's focused on that 1 million UK opportunities, and there's opportunity to get involved at any shape or stage, on whether you have opportunities, whether you have support services that help young people, whether you would like a sponsorship position. These are the conversations that are literally happening as I speak with other members of the team as well. So very exciting, and the fact that, you know, the Downing Street support as well has been tremendous. So yes, we're in a really good place. Opportunities get involved, and then practical ways to help young people.
Yeah. It's great. Yeah, I think sort of the more this conversation goes, it's interesting to hear the different angles that I guess that are the different ways that the social mobility tentacles, if you like, are spreading. But slight technical issue, but I think we've solved it on the Slido piece. It should be up and running there now if you want to engage on that, just with our quick little question to get your thoughts. Stephen, maybe if I could just return to you for a moment. You mentioned in your introduction there around obviously leaving school early, going to work at the council, sort of taking that sort of finance stream without really sort of a thought or direction from your side. You obviously then went on and did your SEMA studies and everything. You mentioned around sort of mentoring, or maybe even just having an ally, somebody you can talk with. Sort of, how did that actually work in practice, or sort of who was that, or was it multiple people along the journey?
Yeah, I was very fortunate in both of my initial roles that I had managers that took the time, that made me feel that I belonged, that gave me the framework. And that was very much one-to-one. It was recognizing that because of where I was, the requirements to meet the basic life fundamentals of heat, light, shelter, food took time, took energy, took greater resource and focus from me than it would do from somebody else that came from a very stable background. So they gave me that space. They sent me to night school. That wasn't necessarily an opportunity that was there, but I did 9 years of night school, and they were managers, and they were line managers of mine. One who was actually 2 steps removed, who actually just took the time to make me feel I belonged. And there's some bits that are coming up that teaches you the ropes. It gives you the framework with which you identify. And having come up through care without a framework about family life, that was something that resonated with me, and it gave me a sense of identity, belonging, and it shaped me. I think the most important manager I ever had, at 25, I left the council and joined a development company as number 3, in the middle of a recession. Number 1 and number 2 left, and I ended up holding this arm of a PLC business in Sussex, mid Sussex, through a difficult time. Took it through an audit, and the regional chairman came down to me and he said, "Look, I've got to offer you a directorship." He said, "But you're not qualified." He said, "Will you do me a favour and reject it?" And I said, "Look, if that's what I'll do, if that's what I should do, that's what I'll do." And he said, "Right, I'm going to create a role for you." And he did. And I went to night school, qualified. 3 years later, I took the directorship. And but if he hadn't taken that time to understand me and to reward me for what I'd done by giving me that feedback and that guidance and advice, I almost certainly wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah, I think that's quite powerful. To think of having that support, I guess, throughout your career as well.
And it continues through your career. You can never necessarily leave that background behind. Mm-hmm. As Justin said, he didn't have a degree. Uni wasn't an option for me, and yet I had a headhunter ring me up 18 months ago and said, "Look, I've got the perfect job for you," he said, "but I can't put you forward because they're insisting on a red brick degree." And I said, "Well, I don't want to leave anyway." I said, "But how ridiculous is that I'm 30 years into a career, and because of what I didn't do 30 years ago, they don't even want to talk to me."
Yeah, that's it's quite blinkered, I suppose, is what it seems, and I can see Sarah nodding along there as well, and Justin. But Justin, you mentioned that Grant Thornton sort of, I guess, changed the way you go about recruitment as well. Moving away from moving away from that university qualification, full stop, and looking at school leavers, but maybe also looking broader than red brick. But I guess, in a firm like Grant Thornton, what would you say that has done for diversity of thought and maybe sort of being able to engage with a wider, range of clients?
Well, I mean, undoubtedly, it's increased the diversity within the organisation. Absolutely, it has, and because, as I said, we started this back in 2017. We've got some really good data to show that. Although, to Sarah's point, we did tie ourselves in knots a bit about definitions and language and what we call, never knowingly under-engineered being a professional services firm. And I think some of the some of those lessons for us were, and I kind of touched on this, and as did Sarah and the others, it's one thing, you're kind of getting a more diverse range of people into your business. It's another thing making them feel welcome and keeping them in the business. So you can't do one without the other. And I think we've had to spend a lot of time and thought and energy and thinking, well, how do we make sure that when people land in that business, they feel like that they belong to it, and they feel like it's somewhere that is where they want to be, they can be themselves, but also recognizes that people are starting from different places. And don't get me wrong, we've got absolutely nothing against, graduates coming from universities. They've got a whole range of really valuable skills as well, and there is more and more diversity within that. But I think it's about making sure that we're open to a much broader range of people than just that. And as you kind of alluded to, in a very simple sense, that's much more reflective of our client base. We act for thousands and thousands of companies and organizations and public sector bodies and individuals. And, how can we best serve those clients if we don't have people that, that they can relate to and understand and, kind of have a similar background. But I think, that piece around making sure that we are inclusive has been really, really important. I think the other bit, which was that we've put a lot of effort into, is thinking about how we attract, because it's one thing kind of throwing open the doors, but if people don't know where you are or what you do or have no idea, then you're not going to get anyone coming through those doors. So, we've done lots of work with schools. There's tons of evidence around where it shows that if you give school kids the opportunity to come and see what it's like, a bit of work experience, see some role models, some of our the people that have joined us through the school leaver programs they're very keen to get involved in kind of programs which kind of talk about what they're doing. So all of those kind of role models is a really important part of it. So it's not a straightforward thing. It's not it's not something that you can do and change things overnight. We've done a huge amount of work, and I think also to Stephen's point, who those people interact with, who are their line managers, who are their mentors, is really, really important, and how they kind of manage that. So investing in giving those people in our organizations the tools and skills around that kind of leadership and management development, so that they can do that role that we're asking, which is absolutely fundamental. A bit like from a personal perspective, as a youngster, maybe I didn't have the same kind of boundaries as other people, and I needed someone who had some patience and gave me a bit of latitude and helped me to learn. That was the role of work for me, was to kind of start to help me see those things. We need to think about making sure that our people who are managing those people when they come into the business have those skills and those tools to be able to do that role effectively.
Yeah, thanks for that, Justin. Similarly, I guess, Jazz, with your role at Sky currently, looking at the D&I certainly for the early careers piece, are you seeing something similar there to maybe what Grant Thornton saw from from a professional services firm, and sort of how are you going about that? Maybe sort of thinking about attraction, retention as well for young career people.
Okay. So do you mean in the sense of like what challenges we might face with attraction and retention? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I would say that it's a two-way street. Big arguments around, why do young people from low socioeconomic backgrounds struggle to achieve, the same success as their middle class and upper class counterparts, is often debated. And people say, is it something to do with the young people? Is it the way that the companies act? What's the root of this? just to give some context, socioeconomic background is actually the strongest determinant of future career success. And we see in the UK at the moment that more young people than ever from low income families are actually attending uni, going to uni, achieving great results. And for many of them, it's actually not really improving their career outcomes at all. Many of them graduate and go into low paid non-graduate roles. The London School of Economics found that even when a graduate from a working class background goes to Russell Group Uni and gets the first class honours, they still don't have nearly as good career outcomes as people from privileged backgrounds who get 2-2s. So it's like, what is going on and what's behind that? But bringing that back to what we found at Sky and what we're doing at Sky. To give some context, I'm quite new to Sky, so I'm 7 weeks into this role. So I can only tell you, based on, what's happened previously and what I've gotten stuck into up to this point. But like I say, I think it's a two-way thing. So I would say a big thing that ties into it, perhaps less of a problem in Sky, which is a media company and has now become, more inclusive. But in many of these elite kind of investment banking and law, in all honesty, I would think it roots down to classism and people just not fitting a mold. If you get a job, it's one about talent and intelligence, but it's also if you fit a mold. Do you speak in the right way? Do you have the right mannerisms? And often young people from working class backgrounds, they don't fit that mold of, what an elite company wants to see. And even if the elite company wants to be inclusive, they might have clients that wouldn't respond well to these young people on the phone and, leading business meetings, etc. So it's that issue. And then I think it also, ties into young people having the perception that, well, actually, this company might not be inclusive. So why would I want to go to a company in which I feel that I can't be my authentic self, in which no one looks and speaks like me, in which I might feel like the odd one out, in which I might be looked down upon. So then young people don't even, want to apply. Speaking on my own experiences through the Drive Forward Foundation, when I was at uni, they helped me to find a range of internship experiences at very swanky marketing agencies in Knightsbridge. And, after completing that 6-week internship experience, I just thought, I don't fit in this place. And, despite going to a Russell Group uni and achieving top grades, I went off and I got a job in the local authority because I thought that's a place in which I fit in. I feel that I belong. And, I had a perception that corporate is just not a space that's inclusive and welcoming to people like me. And I think many young people, from my backgrounds feel that way as well. I think also what we see, maybe not necessarily at Sky, but at different companies, is that young people, that you have practices in place that make social mobility impossible. Unpaid internship experiences required. A lot of starting salaries of companies are literally too low to cover the cost of living in London. So if you come from a low socioeconomic background, especially, let's say, a deprived community in the north of England, or other areas that experience extreme socioeconomic disadvantage, it's actually impossible to relocate to London, where the majority of well-paid opportunities are concentrated. I would say a big thing as well is also just lack of knowledge around careers in the corporate world. So a lot of young people from low socioeconomic backgrounds that achieve well, and this is probably something that Sarah has seen, tend to go into very traditional professions. So like medicine, law, I don't know, accounting, dentistry, but they wouldn't think, oh, I want to go into professional services. I want to go into private equity. I want to go into fintech, because what the hell is that, right? And if you don't have a family connections and a school that teaches you about all of these career opportunities, then it's almost like you don't stand a chance, because, with many of these industries, you need to know what internships to get at uni. You need to know how to write a CV. You need to know all of these things that at the end of the day don't get taught to anyone outside of the walls of private school. So the state education system is not enabling young people to go into these fulfill elites and well-paid career paths in the corporate world, it is literally like, you know, a jungle of confusion that young people have to navigate, and it's very, very difficult to do that if you don't come from a privileged background. So yeah, that's some of the reasons, but there's many more as well.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and just sort of linking that to, I know sort of when we spoke last week, Dax, as well, in a way you were talking a little bit similarly around that, and perhaps a little bit from your own background, as you say, you know, went to a not top performing state school, but yet you managed to you know, get yourself to Cambridge and sort of not feel you had that imposter syndrome, if you like. Why would you say that is, or sort of what encouragement did you get to maybe overcome that?
Oh, it's a really, really good question, and this really gets to the heart of it. I was very fortunate in that my family was very strong. So, I mean, it was only me, mum and dad. I didn't have any brothers and sisters, and I'd been brought up with a work ethic. So because my parents both worked for everything and they weren't about material values, you know, they devoted themselves to creating the right environment for me. Now, that didn't mean to say that I had an easy time. I certainly didn't have an easy time. I was actually, because with my full name, it's Bosnian, I got bullied very heavily at school, so it wasn't much fun at all. But that work ethic kept me going, and I guess by creating that right environment parentally, it created a space where I actually internally defined myself. And not that I knew that right at the age of 4, that, you know, I'd have some of these thoughts and you know, this inner voice that kept saying, you're going to do something really amazing. And, you know, you would then compare and contrast that. I'd sit there and go, this is where I am, but I know I'm going to do something amazing. That's why I'm here on this planet. So the quietness of my family created that space. Going through the schools that I did, the schools were supportive, but it didn't mean to say that, you know, children were kind and unkind, because behaviourally that all stems from family relationships and lots of histories and things that, you know, we're all here to break that cycle. That's why we're here. So kind of working through that, I did work through that. I was at school and I you know, I would ace my grades, right? Because I didn't sit there and go, you know, I don't get on with this teacher, I can't do this subject, or this subject was too hard. It was based on the work ethic my parents had given me. You know, it was, you know, today you need to complete this, tomorrow you need to do that. And I really enjoyed learning about different things. I really loved learning, and I was really grateful for the opportunities that I did have. And so I did. And so anything I did, I didn't even think that was, I thought everybody did that, right? I thought everybody just kind of got into their work and got on with it. But then I got to my GCSEs and I wasn't comparing myself to anybody else. So people just said to me, you know, you're actually very good. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm just doing what I need to do because I've been asked to do this homework today. So I'm going to do my homework today. And then I got interested, and so I was self-driven, and a lot of the things I did, you know, my mum would say to me, you're writing this out 8 times, or why are you doing that? You don't need to. I was like, yeah, because I want to get it absolutely spot on right. Mm-hmm. And that was something I had within me. I didn't know that was a special gift or talent. So what happened was then, and this is, you know, some of the conversations, Stephen, you mentioned this as well, is around, you know, it being accidental versus setting up the system for success, which is why I'm today very focused on systemic change. You know, I had an economics teacher, ex-RAF pilot, who happened to have studied at Cambridge. And they said to me at my GCSEs, actually, you know, you could go to this Cambridge place. And I've said, what's Cambridge? I didn't know what it was. And I went home to my dad, you know, he's sort of been, you know, working down the mines for years. I mean, really humble man. And he said, well, can't you go to Nottingham? Because it's like, you know, that's local. It's a lot easier. And I said, I kind of looked into it. I said, I could, Dad, but I actually think this Cambridge place is quite nice. And why not aim for Cambridge? I may not get it, but why not aim for it? So I thought, well, I'm working on what I need to work on anyway. And, you know, what if I did? And, there was a lot of internal work, a lot of, hard work generally, just getting everything right and aligned. And really that's how it happened. And it was really interesting because I was one of two people from the school to ever go to Cambridge. It may have changed now, but certainly at that particular time. And, everybody was filling in their applications and everyone pursuing different routes. But, in my mind, I decided this was my next goal, and I'd look at other places as well. But for Cambridge, you had to have this interview. And of course, the school wasn't particularly equipped at doing this thing, because so we literally cobbled together with the head, the deputy head, to sort of take me through an interview process, just as a bit of a practice. I'd done my own forms and I'd rewritten it clearly about 8 times by the time I got it right. But anyway, we kind of went through all of that. And I remember coming into the university and, absolutely tremendous, because very, very, there's some, images of some of the top schools and universities. Cambridge is very, very focused on equality and diversity, and they did recognise my background, and they do check those measures. Everybody's working on it clearly, but there is, we need to take these stigmas away. And anyway, so I went into this very scary conversation. So I thought, I just turned up this place, and one of the things where they sat us all around the table and they said 2 out of 3 of you are not getting through, and I thought, this is not the conversation I need right now just before the interview. I'm like, I need you to say you might stand a chance rather than here's what you can't do. So anyway, that kind of happened, and then after that, they did the reality check and then they supported you. But at the time, I didn't know what I was going through at that particular time. So, interesting. And my interview, you never reveal your Cambridge questions. I think that's one of the things. But, some of the questions were really deep, and you could never really prepare for them. Just some really interesting political questions and things like that I genuinely answered. But I do remember walking into the room where everybody was preparing, and I walked into this room, this kid from the local state school, and everybody was reading the FT, and I thought, I've never looked at the FT. So I kind of picked up a copy of the paper, thought I better just hide behind this paper for a little bit, because everybody else is kind of clearly reading the paper going, I'm not sure my odds are that good. But anyway, it wasn't about the FT was the point, right? But I didn't have the coaching at the time to know whether it was about the FT or it wasn't. It was just quite scary going there in that particular space. But, having put all the effort in, I did get through. I didn't know that I would get through, but it was about setting that particular goal. And I guess the difference was, due to the family environment, I'd set quite a lot of life goals quite early. Not all of them, but quite a lot of them were fairly clear. And I was also very clear that, in my values, I would therefore focus on family and having my children as well. There's a lot of very successful people that do focus on that success. But it's about whether that's family or, there are different ways to fulfill broader life success. It doesn't necessarily mean about having children, but having that broader set of things and being very clear on that value set. So for me, I guess, very long answer to your question, forgive me, but some of those other things that we need to make sure are embedded in schools are very important. The entrepreneurialism, the how to navigate life, all of those practical skills. Some schools do that really well, but part of the foundational work that myself and my husband are working on is building out some of that broader awareness. And to Jazz's point, it's if you're already of an affluent background, whatever school you go to, the fact that mum and dad know everybody in town, that in itself, implicitly, you pick it up as a child, and then you know everybody in town. So that's the difference between where you're from and how it works.
I think it's interesting as well, and just sort of seeing some of the chat come through on the side of on the sidebar here. A few people have mentioned the sort of the concept of maybe getting above your station if you're maybe from a what might be a working class background and wanting to advance. And I was speaking just this week with one of our CFO community as well, and she mentioned something very similar to that. That her mother talks about getting it, going beyond your station or above your station or whatever. And she spoke about she even sort of tweaked her accent a bit to maybe fit better into the corporates that she was working with. But Jazz, I think we spoke a little bit about that before. That's that notion of, I suppose, culture and, you know, people maybe being able to bring their entire selves to work and to the organizations that they work for. How have you seen that?
As in, what, when you say how have I seen that, how have I seen it successfully, or
Either, yeah, I guess. Have you seen it work well?
In my opinion, I think it's just beginning to change now in some industries. You know, I can't say that I've had a peek into what's happening in every industry. You know, I think in some industries, let's say where it's seen as, oh, cool to, you know, bring an authentic self, let's say marketing and media and creative and some of these things, entertainment, you know, allowing people from working class backgrounds and let's say like Black people to be authentic in themselves is accepted. But I think in many industries, you know, going off the experiences that I've heard from a lot of people, it's like, you know, I guess a good way to put it would be a lot of companies say, oh, we accept anyone from any background. So you can be of any race, any class, any socioeconomic background. But actually what's like implicit is that actually when you arrive, there's some kind of expectation that you will adapt and change and, you know, speak in the way that everyone else speaks and act in the way that everyone else speaks and, you know, follow the norms of everyone else. You know, I've encountered a lot of older professionals, successful professionals that say, you know, I'm from this background and I came from a disadvantaged background, but actually when they present as, you know, very middle class and like well spoken, and you know, you wouldn't necessarily identify them as being culturally, you know, working class. So I've got this perception, and I think a lot of people do, and what I've witnessed is, you know, you can come from a working class background, but you have to be culturally middle class. It's the same thing that some people say, you know, you can be Black as long as when you go into a place, you then act white and put on a white voice, you know? So it's like, we'll accept you as long as you don't be you, basically.
Yeah. Do you think, and maybe it's one for anybody else who'd like to answer as well, but do you think that maybe sometimes there's almost a reverse of that some people maybe like to sort of affiliate themselves maybe as being more working class, even though maybe by lots of measures, and Sarah, you spoke about the various, I suppose, ways of looking at this earlier, they might be very much middle class, but sort of historically, or maybe sort of through their family, they identify as working class. And it's interesting, I'm just looking at the results of our little poll coming through as well. It was about, I think 42% of today said they would see themselves as coming from that lower socioeconomic background, and a little bit more than half then saying no. So I suppose more of a maybe middle class or upper or other. But what do you think of that, Sarah? Is there almost a reverse view sometimes?
So you absolutely get both. So what Jazz has described so powerfully is this really difficult association of lots of kind of characteristics and behaviours of privileged people that we see as capability and talent. So people talk about polish, confidence. Steve has talked very powerfully about still being obsessed with the degree someone did kind of 30, 40 years ago, as though that matters more. And we know that a Russell Group degree is a good marker of someone who's had a privileged background. So there's a real association between the behaviours and characteristics of privilege and talent and capability. And so that's really difficult and uncomfortable in this space. But absolutely, you also get the same thing. There's been some really interesting research Sam Friedman, who's a sociologist who specialises in this, has done about people claiming working class backgrounds, sometimes 2 or 3 generations ago, because there's a credibility and a grittiness that we recognise and warm to about coming from humble backgrounds, having had to work your way up. You want to be clear that you've done all this work yourself. You don't want people to think your privilege means it came easy to you. So you kind of want to claim that, whilst also not necessarily wanting to present in the ways that we associate working class backgrounds as not being so talented or so capable. So it's really complex, this stuff, and everybody's sort of story and journey is slightly different, which is the richness of diversity and inclusion. But when you come down to it, there are some specific barriers that people from low socioeconomic backgrounds experience, some hard barriers and some soft barriers they consistently experience. And we have to make sure that that's the focus, on changing those barriers, not changing the people who are going to come through.
And just on that one, and it's interesting, a couple of the questions coming through on the Q&A are asking around maybe, I suppose, how social mobility is viewed in the UK, but equally, let's say, what if you're working for an international corporate or something and people don't understand what a Russell Group university is, or don't understand what working class is, or whatever. Do you know, are there different ways that other countries are looking at this, or how do multinationals, and maybe Justin, you might have a view on this as well, with Grant Thornton being, you know, a worldwide business, but how is it outside of the UK?
So socioeconomic disadvantage is a feature of every economy, developed economy in the world, and a combination of income, occupation and education are the markers. So that's just a fact. And again, if people tell you that social mobility isn't a thing in their country, or their country doesn't have this problem, they are wrong. It is a feature, it is there. People are absolutely right that the specifics of free school meals, which is an income measure in our country, or the particular specifics around UK public schools and the kind of grip that 7% of the population have over all sorts of elite jobs and occupations, that's specific to the country, and how that plays out in Germany, for example, is different, or in the US is different. But actually, you can get lost in this stuff. Socioeconomic disadvantage is absolutely in every economy, and the key combination, the income, the occupation, the education, those are the predictors of career success in every developed economy in the world. So it's actually quite consistent, much more consistent than people think.
I think also, just to build into that a little bit, is just in terms of, from different backgrounds, it's about how to access that, and even in different industries, as well as the global picture. So if you look at, say, financial services, you'll get some of the large global firms, but also you'll get some of the fintechs, and there's different dynamics in terms of who's attracted to which areas and how that all works. And also there's a lot more diversity in some of the smaller firms, which is quite interesting. But forgive me, I know Justin, you were about to jump in.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say, I guess, really just kind of building on the point that you were making, Sarah. I think from an international perspective, it's absolutely true, that there is an issue with this across the board. In it, I guess, what you see is that the understanding and perception of the issue is different in different jurisdictions, and some, and arguably you'd say, countries like ours and the US and maybe the European countries are maybe more aware of this than others, but then I'm generalizing horribly, and that's kind of, and it's probably a crass statement to make, but I think that it is absolutely prevalent everywhere, and I guess it's just different places in the world are in different stages of recognizing and doing something about it, and proactively doing something about it, and to Dax's point, and equally that's not just geographical, but it is sector. If you look at kind of technology, engineering businesses, kind of just by dint of the pool of people that they're pulling from, and kind of those types of qualifications, there is an imbalance from the starting point in terms of the talent pool. So it's a tougher ask for them to change things quickly. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't be, but you're just starting from a different place.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I think just again back to the questions that we're seeing coming through, and actually probably a nice little one to sort of draw our discussion to a close today was well, from Ruth South asked about sort of 3 nudges maybe that could be given for organizations or people wanting to, you know, recommend ways that they might act or improve around social mobility. But so instead of 3, I might ask for 5, if you'd all like to maybe give one nudge each that our audience today could take away to sort of either reflect or think about how they might improve social mobility in their organizations. Who'd like to go first? Putting you on the spot. Dax, would you like to go?
So I think for me, very, very genuinely, I mean, we all have individual stories and they're all very different. I would say take the time to look at your own story and understand what is it within that resonates with social mobility. Being clear on one's own purpose really makes you understand why you're driving social mobility. And I work on this, but I always work on it again and again. It tells me sort of much more deeper things about why I'm taking the actions, because I believe in these causes. And I guess that the part of that is really that to make that difference, and this is about social mobility, but all the neurodiversity elements, you know, being very clear on that purpose and how it resonates to your personal story, but then turning that into one key action. If each of us take one key action beyond talking about it, you know, I've given some practical examples as to how, you know, you could get involved. There are many, many others out there. So find one action and just take the action and then see what happens and then try it again. And if it works, it doesn't, just keep trying that, but make it a practical action.
Thanks. Justin, I think you were going to jump as well there too.
I was just going to say, and I guess, you know, a lot of this starts with the, you know, kind of accountability and alignment to these types of issues from the leadership. I think in terms of that messaging and not just saying the words, but also walking the talk is absolutely fundamental from the top, and kind of making and as leaders, you know, actually taking some accountability that things are going to change. I think that's where it starts. And then there's loads of stuff that we've all talked about in terms of those practical things that you can do. So, you know, kind of engaging with a broader talent pool, working with schools, you know, to Jazz's point, trying to make your organization attractive to people that wouldn't necessarily think that they've got a career, all of those, but it actually all does come back to the accountability of and the actions and yeah, basically walking the talk from the leadership.
Thanks. Stephen, any thoughts from your side? Final thought.
Yeah, I think for me, like, part of it is really listening and just not hearing, because a lot of what is happening is not going to be open to you. The people are not necessarily going to be saying to you, my basic needs are not being met. And if you've got employees there, their life stages will change. And this is something that isn't just as a youngster, it will go through your career. And there are certain times when it will come back and you'll need to do, so you need to understand your people and you need to listen to what they're telling you, but then invest in them and give them that sounding board and give them that opportunity to, if they feel comfortable to articulate their wider position. You know, the vast majority of people that employed me in the middle of my career would have had no idea of my background. You know, and unless I was challenged about why I didn't go to university. You know, I've become much more open and comfortable about it, to be able to try and use it as a force of good as I've got more experienced and comfortable in myself.
Thanks. Thanks, Stephen. I'm sorry to rush you there, but I think we're getting a hard push here to end. Sarah and Jazz, maybe one word from both of you to think, if there was a nudge, what would that word be?
Look at your recruitment. Is what you're asking for what you need, or is what you're asking for what you always ask for? And if it's not what you need, change it to ask for what you need. No one ever regrets making that change.
Thank you. Jasmine, you're on mute.
Sorry, guys.
A very quick word, please.
Okay, I would say look for potential, not polish, and also evaluate achievements in the context of which they were achieved. Not all achievements are equal, even though on the outside it might look that way.
Thank you. And I'm so sorry to rush at the end, because even some of those points are just so interesting. We could go down other points of discussion on them. But look, really thank you to our panel for taking part today and giving of your time. It's really appreciated. I hope that you, the BIE community, have learned a lot from this and got a lot out of the webinar today. We're going to share a write-up on this afterwards with you all, and so hopefully, if there's any sort of more points or things, or continue the discussion, we can do that through our other channels. But please note as well, our next event is planned for the 15th of June around disability, hidden disability, etc. So just on that note, have a good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for coming along.